משנה ב' לאחר שלמדנו במשנה הקודמת, after we learned in the previous Mishnah, שמצילים כתבי הקודש מפני הדלקה, that we save holy books because of the fire, שנפלה בשבת, that fell on Shabbos, מוסיפה משנתנו ללמד, our Mishnah continues to teach us, that also שגם מזון מותר להציל. So far we're allowed to save two things. We're allowed to save holy books, and also you're allowed to save food. Yeah, but how much food you're allowed? For Shabbat. You're not allowed to save food for Sunday. In other words, food for Shabbat, whatever you need for Shabbat. What does it mean for Shabbat? בציסון. אבל רק כשיעור הדרוש לו לסעודות שבת, לאותה שבת בלבד, but just the measurement that he needs for that Shabbat only. ויש הבדל בין כתבי הקודש למזון. There's going to be a difference between books, holy books and food. שבכתבי הקודש הקלו חכמים מפאת קדושתם. When it comes to holy books, the חכמים made the sages, made a decree on Eruvin. They said when it comes to holy objects, we're going to be very lenient. But when it comes to food, we're not going to be very lenient. והתרו להציל אפילו לתוך חצר שאינה מעורבת. And they permitted, the Chachamim permitted to save books even to a place where there's no Eruv in it. או למבוי שלא נשתתפו בו. Or to a courtyard that they didn't make a lechi. They don't show that it belongs to them. ואילו במזון, but when it comes to food, לא התרו להציל אלא לחצר המבוארת כמבואר להלן. When it comes to food, you're only allowed to go into חצר into if you have Eruv. Now this is strange. What do you mean only if it's Eruv? If there was no fire, are you allowed to take from one house to another house? From another house? No, if there's an Eruv.
Oh, if there is, yes.
So over here, how come they don't allow you?
Because you don't have an Eruv.
Yeah, exactly. But think about it. What do you mean heteru leotzi lechatzer hameruv? What do you mean heteru? If there was no fire, I'm also allowed to. What's the heter? You understand what I'm asking?
No.
In a regular Shabbos,
yeah.
Are you allowed to take from your house to your courtyard if there's an eruv?
Yes.
So what do you mean over here? It says, אנחנו נתיר לך if there's a fire to take from the house to the courtyard. I know, I'm always allowed to. I don't need your heter. Over here, you do need the heter.
Why?
Because the Chachamim have said, once you're going to take the food out because of the fire, you're going to get panic and you're going to put out the food.
Oh,
so
the fire.
The fire. So even though we shouldn't let you take food out, because of the fire, we don't take anything out. We're afraid. Over here, for food, we'll give you a heter to take away from the fire. Okay? Like we're going to say in Mishnah Gimel.
Yeah.
וכבר הזכרנו בהקדמה למשנה הקודמת, we already mentioned in the introduction to the previous Mishnah, שאסרו חכמים להציל מזון הרבה, that the sages did not allow you to take a lot of food. Why? Because if you've got a collection of whiskey, and I'm going to allow you to take a collection of whiskey, oh, this is $5,000, this is $10,000, it's money for you, everything is getting wasted. Once you panic and you're going to put things away. So they don't allow, actually we shouldn't allow you to take any food. But because it's Shabbat, at least for the Shabbat, we let you take just for Shabbat, for the meals, that's right. שמתוך שאדם בהול על ממונו, because the person is worried about his money, להצילו, to save it, ישכח ששבת הוא. He's going to panic with the fire coming, he's going to think straight. ויבוא גם לכבות הדלקה, he's going to come to extinguish the fire. ברם, לא גזרו חכמים, אלא לגבי אותו בית שהדלקה פרצה בו. The sage says, you know, the houses in the courtyard, the decree is only for the house that's on the fire, not on the other houses. So you can take from this house to the other houses. אבל בתים אחרים הסמוכים לדלקה. But the other houses that the fire is not in them yet, they're allowed to save from their houses out. Because their houses,
they don't have fire.
They don't have fire. You're not afraid to extinguish. And they're allowed anyway to start saving. שבעליהם מפחדים שמא תתפשט הדלקה ותגיע להם, מותר להם להציל כל מה שירצו לחצר. They're allowed to take everything out of the house, put it in the courtyard, away from the dangerous zone, let's call it. שהרי אין שם חשש לכיבוי, because over there They're not worried about lekibui. So in other words, you're allowed to save things permittable to save on Shabbat. The problem is that if you're on fire, then you're not allowed to because we're afraid you're going to extinguish it. Like you say, everything is not relevant today because there's a fire today. It's pikuach nefesh. You call zero and you extinguish everything, so the neighbors are not going to get damaged. Matzilim mipnei adleka shenafla b'Shabbat. You're allowed to save food because in front of the fire that fell on Shabbat. Mazon shalosh seudot. How much? For 3 meals. כלומר, שאינו מותר להציל אלא כפי הדרוש לו לשבת זו בלבד. You're only allowed to save whatever food you need for this Shabbat. שהוא לא יותר ממזון שלו. It doesn't mean you're allowed, it depends when it happened.
Exactly.
But if it happened... Not more than 3 סעודות.
If it happened in Minche, you already had Friday night and Saturday morning or lunch, you got one more left.
That's right. שכן חייב אדם לאכול בשבת 3 סעודות, because the person is allowed to eat on Shabbat 3 meals. הראוי לאדם. מזון הראוי לאדם מציעים בשביל בני אדם. So you're allowed to save, it's interesting. It looks like he's allowing to save 3 meals also for your animals. So you're allowed to save 3 meals for you, but the meals that you're allowed to save for you is things that men eat. הראוי לבהמה, you're also allowed to save for your animal, only for Shabbat purposes. אוכל הראוי ודרוש לבהמתה לאכילה בשבת. The dog is with you, you can get a bag of dog bonzo for him. מצילים לבהמה. You're allowed to save for your dog. כיצד נוהגים בהצלת מזון? How do we mention it? נפלה דלקה בלילי שבת, the fire happened Friday night. לפני הסעודה, before the meal, מצילים מזון 3 סעודות. You're allowed to save for 3 meals. כפי הצורך, לחוסות השבת. Once we allow you for all the meals of Shabbat. בשחרית, if the fire fell in the morning, נפלה דלקה בשבת שחרית, it happened in the morning, לפני הסעודה, before the meal, מצילים מזון 2 סעודות בלבד. You're only allowed to save 2 meals. במנחה, if it happened in מנחה, נפלה דלקה בערב שבת מנחה לפני הסעודה השלישית, before the third meal, אין מצילים אלא מזון סעודה אחת בלבד. You only save for 1 meal. הואיל וחייב לאדם לאכול בשבת 3 סעודות, since you have an obligation to eat 3 meals. לפיכך מותר לעולם להציל בשיעור זה מן הדלקה, בין בליל שבת, בין שחרית, בין מנחה. I think I have the wrong thing over here.
Why?
Because over here, Rabbi Yossi Omer, I don't have, Rabbi Yossi Omer, I didn't read it. Did I read it?
No.
I missed it. Rabbi Yossi Omer, Rabbi Yossi says, לעולם מצילין מזון 3 סעודות. Rabbi Yossi says, I have a different logic. Doesn't matter when it happens, you're allowed to save 3 meals. It says, once the Rabbi Yossi's logic is that
I don't understand it.
It says, once the sages says you're allowed to save, they gave you the permission to save how much? 3 meals. Now you're allowed to save 3 meals. It doesn't matter where you are. I don't care where you are. In other words, the sages never says you're allowed to save. The sages, that in other question, there's an argument of what did the sages say. The Chachamim says, the sages says you're allowed to eat. The verse, where you really say, it says you're allowed to save the meals of Shabbat. That's what it says. So Rabbi Yossi said, you know what they meant? That once there's a fire, 3 meals is allowed to be saved. I don't care when it is during the meal. Even if it's in those days, they allowed 3 meals. The sages says, Rabbi Yossi says, they didn't allow 3 meals. They allowed 3 meals when it's necessary. 3 meals. When you don't need 3 meals, they allowed only the ones that are said. This is his logic.
Yeah.
But it's logical. You can see. Once you have the permission, I have the permission. They gave permission, they gave permission. הואיל וחייב אדם לאכול בשבת 3 סעודות, says once, since there's an obligation of a man to eat on Shabbat 3 meals, לפיכך מותר לעולם להציל בשיעור זה מפני הדלקה. Therefore you will always be allowed to save this much. בין בליל שבת משחרית בין במנחה. Because the sages says 3 meals, so 3 meals. ואין הלכה כרבי יוסי. But the halacha is not going to be like Rabbi Yossi. Okay.